How much lake study do you do with maps and info before you fish a lake?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Michael's a smart guy.
No, it's definitely important. I will always take a look, whether it's spending an hour breaking it down one evening before I get there and kind of picking a bunch of places I want to go, or whether it's as simple as because sometimes I don't like picking a bunch of places before I get somewhere. Sometimes I like to kind of just start looking around.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you're spending 3 or 4 days, I'll get there, I'll look around a bit. Then maybe that night I'll really break it down and say, all right, from what I saw when I first got there and first got a good look around, now I kind of have an idea what I want to look for.
Right.
But I would say it's always pretty important. I mean, even if I'm going to a lake that I know, a lot of times, like if I'm going, like Eufaula, we've got the Eufaula Regional Championship next month. I'm going to spend a good amount of time just looking around, even just sitting on my computer at home, more so than I'm going to just, looking once I'm there. Just
check out YouTube videos and stuff like that. Just, I mean,
I kind of know what I'm getting into for Eufaula. So it's more going to look at the map, see some areas that I kind of want to definitely make sure I get a good look at, and then kind of go from there.
I think that's kind of the big deal, because we have a question up there that asked, I'll scroll up just a little bit, Paul. We have a guy, right? Why do you think guys that have fished a lake all their lives don't have it figured out? So you're doing a lot of homework, you're doing a lot of studying before the tournaments, but with what you just said, I'm going to make an assumption. You do your homework, but you stay in your wheelhouse on how you feel like this is what I'm going to catch them.
Yeah.
And this is how I'm going to catch them. And you stay in your wheelhouse of, a handful of things that you feel like I can go catch a fish on this.
I'm kind of notorious for having a lot of rods on my deck, but they'll almost all be for the same angle. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily that I know that I might, I kind of know when I'm going to most places that this is the deal I'm looking for. I go to Murray for the first time. I know that I'm looking for those offshore fish. I know I'm looking humps, points, that kind of stuff. I know I'm not going to waste a lot of time fishing shallow for the most part, as long as I can figure something out. Now, that's kind of one of those things where that's why for the bigger tournaments, I like giving myself 3 or 4 days at least, just because, especially places you've never been, that first day or two, you're always just feeling it out, kind of getting a good vibe of what the lake's like, what end you might want to be at, what it looks like, all those kinds of things. It's really those like that last day before a tournament for me. A lot of people don't even really, I feel like a lot of people don't even practice hard a lot of times that last day before a tournament, because they feel like they have things kind of dialed in if they have it dialed in. Mm-hmm. Or they feel like, well, I found my spots. I know I'm going to fish those, and it's 1:00 today, and I haven't found much else. So, all right, here's what we're going to work with. I almost will fish hard in practice up till the last minute, because I just always kind of feel like any given spot I pull up on could be that spot.
Right.
And I'm also somebody who's not really scared to set the hook in practice. Mm-hmm. I mean, it depends on where you're at. You don't want to be setting the hook on docks that have 2 fish living on them, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But, you're pulling up on a school of 60 fish. You catching one.
Let me catch a couple of them and see how big they are.
Exactly.
Because you may find a school of 60 fish that are all 1.5 pounders, and that's not going to do you no good.
The Murray Regional, that was key for me.
Yeah.
One of those where I should have won. My co-angler that day probably saw me throw a rod, a couple things like that, because I was topwater fishing blueback style. You know how it is. Mm-hmm. You lose 15 fish throughout the day, and every one of them is the one that makes the difference.
Right.
But that place was the first time I've ever really gotten dialed in terms of the whole, there's certain schools, like that place, largemouth, it's not spots. There were certain schools where it was literally 4 to 7 pounders. And there were just sharks out there swimming around in a big group. And when they started going, they started going. And if you got in them, you were hooking a big one. I found a school that was mixed in with gar. Have you ever pulled up on a brush pile and seen 100 gar over it?
I have not.
But then seen 100 bass sitting beside the gar? It was the craziest thing I've ever seen on live scope. Caught a 5.5 pounder there on day 2. I thought it was all gar when I first found that spot. And I could see some other stuff mixed in. I was like, this is strange. Certain spots, it's just they just do what they want to do, but you got to put the time in to figure that out. And if I don't fish for those fish multiple times, I might just pull up on it for half a second. That third day of that regional, I think I hooked up with the winning fish like 4 times on that spot.
Really?
Drop shot. I even never throw a drop shot. I finally was like, I know this school is all giants. Drop a drop shot down there soon. Can't even move him. Hooks up for about 10 seconds. He pops right off. I mean, it was one of those where just every time you set the hook, it just wasn't working.
Just wasn't that day.